Welcome to the Napa Legal Podcast. I'm Frank DeVito, Senior Counsel and Director of Content here at Napa Legal. You're listening to the Napa Legal Weekly Podcast, where we explore religious liberty from the perspective of faith-based nonprofit organizations. And as we are trying to do as often as possible, we are also recording a lot of guest episodes where we interview esteemed guests who are experts in the various things relevant to the organizations and the lawyers that we work with. So for today's special episode, I'm happy to be joined by our guest, Corrinne Vidales. Corrinne is legal counsel at the Ohio Christian Education Network. She's a Northwest Ohio native, has a bachelor's degree in English from Bowling Green State University, where her passion for education was shaped by her parents' careers as teachers. She's also a graduate of Ave Maria School of Law, or good friends of our organization, and she's also a former Good Counselor Project fellow. We were actually in the inaugural class together in 2022. So she's done a lot of work on a lot of interesting things, especially in the realm of Christian education. And for our purposes, I particularly wanted to bring her on to talk about the whole project of scholarship granting organizations and what that could mean for the future of religious education. So Corrinne, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. So I guess before we go into details about the whole SGO regime, what it is, where it's headed, just wanted to ask basically a little bit about your own background beyond what I just said for the intro, and a little bit about your work at Ohio Christian Education Network.
Yeah, so I think one of the main pieces here is that my parents were both teachers growing up, so I was always really inundated in the education space. I met my husband at Ave Maria, and then we moved back to Ohio. So he was a Florida native, and I brought him back up to Ohio with me because I just really love Ohio. So we ended up here, and then I started working at OSIN, the Ohio Christian Education Network, pretty much right away after finishing law school. And that really brought a lot of things that I did in law school to culmination. I interned with the UN and with Heartbeat International, and some other organizations like that. So I had been kind of involved in this policy space in that sense, and then already having a little bit of educational background and doing some other educational specific things in law school. This was a really good fit for me. So I ended up here. I do a little bit of everything. I run our SGO, our state SGO program here, as well as just helping the schools through state advocacy at the State House. I'm a lobbyist, as well as just any questions they have about navigating the bureaucracy of education, the Department of Education and everything like that.
Great. Yeah, I really wanted to talk to you about SGOs and what's happening at the federal level now, because for one, some of our nonprofit users and lawyers in the Napa Legal Network are asking questions about SGOs, but I think more importantly, a lot of people are not. I don't think there's like a comprehensive enough awareness of what this is and the opportunities that could be available, especially with the federal program that's going into effect. So I guess before we talk about the current state of the law at the federal level, just generally, can you tell our listeners what is an SGO, a scholarship granting organization in general?
Yes, so scholarship granting organizations are, for the most part, exactly what they sound like. They give scholarships to students. In Ohio, we give scholarships to primary and secondary school students. They don't necessarily have to be at private schools. All of ours are in our organization, and there are a few public schools that use the money for additional expenses or like full-time kindergarten, things like that. But for the most part, it's additional money that families can use to attend a private school. And the way that an SGO gets that money is that it's donated to them, and then the donor can claim that donation on their state taxes as a dollar-for-dollar tax credit. So that means if you owe the state $1,000, most of the time that comes out through your paycheck withholding. So, you never really see it. And then when you file your taxes, if you instead donate $1,000 to OSIN SGO, the state will then give you a $1,000 refund. So you can redirect your taxes from the state to an SGO, and then the SGO will award out that money in scholarships.
Yeah, it's a really interesting mechanism. So an SGO it's I assume they're generally 501c3s?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. And okay, so it's a fascinating opportunity to engage donors, right? Because unlike the the tax benefit that you get at the federal level for donating to a C3, which is limited in floor and ceiling and when you can actually claim it and what your income level is. And for people who take the standard deduction, you don't even use it. But this is a dollar for dollar tax credit. So that's a state level program, correct? That's Ohio's tax regime.
So in Ohio, it's $1,500 for a married couple or $750 if you file single. So that money, and it's what's really nice too, is that there's a lot of schools, especially, Catholic schools or private schools that don't, they're really hesitant to take what they consider to be state money. So that might be, a voucher or something like that on the state level. SGOs are even more hands-off than that, right? It's just donor money straight to a third-party organization, which is then sent to the family to use at a school. So it's really streamlined. It makes schools really affordable for families who otherwise wouldn't be able to afford it.
Yeah. So because the way I see it, anybody who's not in dire poverty and doesn't need their money immediately, right, and whose mission aligned should be doing this, right? Because they're literally not losing a dollar. They're just redirecting their taxes.
Exactly. So instead of paying the government, instead of paying taxes out to the government, you can pay your taxes to a Christian school instead, or a Catholic school instead. Whoever you want to give your money to, your tax dollars to, and the credit comes back to you as the donor. In Ohio, we actually are allowed to give up until the tax deadline, so up until April 15th or whenever we file our taxes. The federal program you'll have to give by December 31st. So you will have to float, that $1,700 for 2 months or however long it takes to get your refund. But you could, always change that with your withholding as well. You could just get rid of your withholding and then pay out the $1,700 as if you were paying taxes.
Right. Wow. So one other question about how these work. I think it's clear, but so the money flows from, the donor, the taxpayer, to an SGO, like your organization. And then from your organization, it's a scholarship given directly to a student and the student's family, not to a school. Is that right?
Correct. Yep. So the way it works is the money has to go to families. We send the money to the schools, but it's allocated out per family. That way we're not sending out, 8,000 checks all at once. But as far as that goes, in practice, but it's actually money for the family. Yes.
Okay. And are there parameters, like, does an SGO have to, this is just at the state level, so I guess we'll use Ohio. I know the federal will work a little differently, but are there parameters that say, like, an SGO can't just give scholarships to one single school, or like, is there a breadth required?
So that really varies state to state, right? So in Ohio, we have schools here that are their own SGO. So for Ohio, they just have to primarily award scholarships. So if you're raising more money in scholarships than all your other activity, then you could have your school 501c3 even be an SGO. That's not the case. Most schools operate on a bigger budget. So they'll set up a foundation or something that will then be the 501c3 to administer scholarships. It varies in other states, but in Ohio, we have some that are that way. Our network, we have about 110 schools that we call participating SGO schools for us.
Okay. So in theory, I mean, I guess in practice, at least in Ohio, so St. Mary's Catholic School could just set up an SGO that basically would let every family and their friends all just get a tax credit to basically offset tuition.
Yes. Yep. And that's like one of the things, right? It allows schools to raise tuition. It allows them to be more competitive. All those things, we already are paying private school teachers atrociously, right? Like Catholic school teachers are not making any money. So this is an opportunity to better pay our teachers, to have better services and all sorts of things that we need to operate a successful school.
Yeah, for a state that cares about school choice, I can't think of a better program. So I'm curious, at least before the rollout of this federal program, which I think will change the game, how many states have these right now?
Yeah, so I think there's about 18 states that have some variety of SGO, and they vary, right? So like Florida, there's no state income tax in Florida, but they have a long-standing SGO program. It's all funded through business taxes. So that's even a larger amount of money, that's billions of dollars being paid redirected from business taxes into SGO dollars. So Ohio is ours is a little newer. We've had an SGO in Ohio for about 5 years.
Okay.
Which a lot of states are starting to have more, so there's been an uptick, but there's some that have been around for a long time. Arizona's had theirs since the 90s.
Wow. So yeah, it's like I said, really impressive program. I think has the potential to be such a game changer in
For sure.
education. And with that game-changing hope in mind, tell me what's going on with this new SGO program at the federal level. If I understand, this is part of that one big beautiful bill that went through last year. So what is this federal program? And from what we can see so far, like how will it work?
Right. So the passed in the part of the one big beautiful bill is the federal education freedom tax credit. So essentially, instead of being a state tax credit, it's a federal tax credit. So instead of paying the federal government whatever you owe them in taxes, you can instead make up to a $1,700 donation to a certified federal SGO. So this is a little bit strange because I think for policy reasons they changed it so that within the legislative process they changed it so that states have to opt in to participate. The participation though is only for students. So any taxpayer is eligible. It doesn't matter where the taxpayer lives. So say you live in New Hampshire. New Hampshire doesn't want to opt in. You could donate to a Ohio SGO as a taxpayer and still claim the credit. So the only people who are losing out by this opt-in is the kids, really. So the kids in New Hampshire or wherever that they're not opting in won't be eligible for the scholarships. So it's the governors that will have to opt in for now. One of the possibilities to help with getting more states opted in and more Democrat-led states are kind of the ones that are hesitant to opt in right now. One of the options is that the legislature could actually pass a law requiring the governor to opt in or some other kind of body, like either the Department of Education or whoever, to opt in and publish the list of eligible SGOs in that state. Because the law says, I have it written down somewhere, the law actually says the governor or individual agency or entity designated to make such elections. So that's something else that we'd be working on to get more states involved. So for the federal level, once the state's opted in, they'll publish a list that'll say, here's all the recognized SGOs in our state. And for the most part, that will basically just be every SGO that meets the qualifications. The states are likely not going to be allowed to put any additional eligibility restrictions on an SGO. So as long as they're a 501c3, 90% of their funding goes to scholarships, those kinds of things, then they'll be eligible to be on that list. And then donors will be able to give. So as of now, it's $1,700. There's some debate over if it will be $3,400 for a married couple or just $1,700 per filing. That is waiting to be seen in the rules that will come out. As of now, they're saying end of September is when the rest of the rules will come out. So we're all waiting for that. They had said this summer, and now they've changed it to end of September. But for the most part, it will run pretty similarly to how a lot of states run their SGOs. The donors will give, they'll get a receipt or a letter that says, thank you for your contribution, this much. They'll submit that with their tax filing. Families will apply to the scholarship granting organization and receive the scholarships. The nice thing about the federal program is it's very inclusive for who's eligible for scholarships. So in Ohio, we have to prioritize students who are at 300% of the federal poverty level. That doesn't mean only those students, we just have to prioritize them. In some states, you have to be, a student with disabilities in order to get a scholarship. Or in some states, you have to be under like 200% and nobody else is eligible. For the federal program, any student who's at 300% of the median area gross income. So that's kind of a weird standard, but that means, I think somewhere in the 90 percentile of students will be eligible. So for example, where I live, I think that number for 100%, it was like 130. So anybody who's making, $390,000 or less is eligible for the federal scholarships.
Wow. So this is I have a couple of follow-up questions. I guess
Yeah.
one for an existing state SGO and states that already have the programs like yours, like OSIN, how much adaptation, if any, will there be for you to become, a federally qualified SGO for the federal tax credit?
Yeah. So for us, I think in Ohio, pretty much every existing state SGO will be eligible. The one caveat is our single school SGOs will have to join another school because you have to have scholarships given to at least 2 schools
I see.
and a minimum of, I think, 10 students for the federal program. For the state program, that's not a requirement. So some schools will be looking to join a network like ours in order to take advantage of the federal. Something like OSIN, we should be eligible as far as we can see so far. We should be good to go. We're actually launching a more national organization as well to help other states who are opting in just through the Christian Education Network to help them kind of get up and running with a similar program.
Yeah. Wow, this is fascinating stuff. So I guess again, we don't know all the rules and what's going to happen, but a couple of questions about the mechanics of the federal, if they're available, if you know. You said the tax credit at the federal level is up to $1,700. Is that
Yes,
right?
yep,
Is that
1,700, maybe 3,400. That part's still up in the air.
okay? So do we think that that's 1,700 per individual, 3,400 per like married
So
filing jointly couple?
that's what we've been lobbying for, and I know a lot of other national organizations have been lobbying for that. When the director of the Treasury just released some like previews, he didn't mention that at all, which we think is probably a good thing, right? That might mean that they're still considering it. He didn't say nope, 1,700 hard cap. So possibly 3,400 for a married couple. We have to wait and find out.
Okay. And also, do we know whether this is a refundable credit for people who don't owe taxes or if it won't be?
It's non-refundable, so it
Okay.
will only be so right. If you only owe $1,000, don't give 1,700, but you could because you can actually roll it over for up to 5 years.
Oh,
So if you give too much, they'll roll it over for the next couple of years.
okay, that's helpful. Okay. So I guess for those who are lower income or for those like me who have a lot of children who
Yeah.
we get child tax
I'm
credit
having
for.
children at the same rate that my income keeps going up, so I just keep not paying taxes.
Yeah, that's been my experience so far as well. Having a lot of kids and working in the nonprofit space, it seems to track. So I want to ask a question I think I already know the answer to, but so obviously for states that don't currently have an SGO program, this kind of pressures them to play or else they're going to lose out. But for states that already have these programs, what is the additional benefit that will come from the federal program?
Yeah, so for donors, they can give to both. You can give to your state program, and then you can give additionally for federal as well. So for a state, a donor could give $1,500 to OSIN SGO, and then they could give $1,700 additionally to OSIN SGO to claim for federal. So you can't claim the same gift twice. It has to be 2 separate gifts, one for state, one for federal, but you'll be able to claim both, right? So that's in a state like Ohio, that's doubling the amount that we're currently raising in SGO funds. For a state who doesn't currently have an SGO program, they're going to want to make sure they get in on this because kind of like I mentioned earlier, if they don't opt in, taxpayers can still take advantage of it, right? So the taxpayers are still going to be donating. They're just not going to be donating to an organization in their state. Their tax dollars are going to go elsewhere. They're going to go out of state. So I think that's, a big selling point for states who are considering whether or not to opt in. It's not money that the state would have otherwise, right? It's federal tax dollars. So they're not losing anything. If anything, they're gaining by having the additional schools, the additional scholarship and everything like that will come into their state because of an SGO.
Right. That makes sense. Then I guess the upside for states like yours that already have these programs is if once this rolls out, there are states that still refuse, right? If California or New York or whoever doesn't have a program.
From the grandmas in California, right? Like, oh, your kid goes to school in Ohio, just donate to us.
Yeah. Or even if they have no nexus, if you can just make the pitch that your mission is aligned with their values, it's like
exactly
free money they can give to your organization instead of the federal government. It seems pretty attractive, even without a connection.
Exactly.
So I guess my last question on this is however broad or predictive you want to be, what opportunities do you see this new program and SGOs in general presenting for the future of, private education, school choice?
Yeah, we've been saying this is the greatest evangelism opportunity that we will ever see in our lifetimes, right? The more money that's coming in for scholarships, the more students that we're able to get out of public schools and into, a worldview that teaches them what is truth, that teaches them about God and about Jesus. The more opportunities there are for that, more schools are going to be started, more churches are going to be sharing about the impact that these students will be having, right? People will start going back to church because they've learned about it in their schools. They'll be able to go to any school they want to. So for us, at the Christian Education Network, for us, this is a huge evangelism opportunity to just get kids into a school where they can actually learn about truth and they can actually learn about God's love for them.
Yeah. Do you think so? I think modest anticipation would be more money for these existing SGOs, therefore more money for, currently operating religious schools. And so you can maybe pay a more closer to a living wage to teachers. You can get more students in. Do you think the impact is going to be big enough where we'll actually see new schools created as a result of these programs?
Yeah, we are looking to launch up to maybe 20 schools in Ohio through our organization. And a lot of that has been because of the SGO. We started a school planting ministry to help churches that wanted to start schools. And we offer, we say, hey, you get going, you can raise $20,000. That should be fairly easy for your first year of school. Like that like saves you so much in startup costs. So we launched about 15 new schools last year, and we're looking to launch probably 20 this year. And that's, we've only been doing that for maybe 5 years.
Wow. So what does your work personally look like in all of this and helping the SGO movement and anything else you're doing at OSIN before we wrap up? Like what are you doing in this world in particular?
Yeah, so right now, a lot of what I'm doing is just running our state SGO program, right? It's kind of keeping ahead of that. That has even grown exponentially. Our very first year, we did like 1.5 million, and then just growing, doubling or even more year over year has been amazing to see that grow. We've built out a team to help take an SGO program nationally. We've kind of said, hey, we've been doing this. We've been pretty successful at it for the past couple of years. Like, let's try to help other people. So we've been hosting some similarly minded organizations in other states and said, hey, why don't you come on board with us? We'll help with all the administrative end of the SGO. You just help us get schools in to participate in it. So I've been doing a lot of that. Right now in Ohio, we're a little bit slow over at the State House because we have a midterm election coming up. So not doing too much over there, but when lame duck season hits, I'll be pretty busy again over with State House advocacy, things like that, helping the legislators just to see the value of Christian education too. That's been huge for them. We have a lot of property tax stuff going on right here, debate in Ohio. So I think that's been really helpful just to share some of our member schools with the legislators to say, hey, this is what this school is doing in your area, and that kind of thing. So it's been really rewarding for me and really rewarding to help the SGO and see all of our schools grow.
Yeah, no, it's awesome work. I mean, well, first of all, as we wrap up, thank you so much for joining us. This is an awesome conversation. I think a really important one. Yeah, I think well, there are a lot of cultural reasons, some of which I'll not expand on here. But I think we were talking off before we started recording about what a shakeup COVID was in our own educational professional lives. But I think on the level of K through 12 education, COVID was such a watershed moment where millions of people saw what was happening in public schools through their Zoom cameras.
And for so many people, Christian schools were the only ones that let them actually go to school.
Yeah.
A lot of people here made a switch.
I know even in my next door neighbors at the house we lived at during COVID, they were, non-practicing Catholics, like largely secular family, but they were so horrified by like what they were seeing with their kids' behavior being at home and on Zoom that they pulled them out. They homeschooled for a year. Then they sent them to the Catholic school, even though they weren't. I don't even think the parents were baptized Catholics. Wow. They were like Italians, so they Catholic background. But then like a couple years later, they met some Catholics. Like the family is largely Catholic now. So The
That's amazing.
transformation that these alternative education options afford, especially in the faith-based, Christian space, is just could really be transformational for the
Yeah.
culture. And there's
And
so
this
much
will
more
be,
need.
this is, SGOs are they come with almost no strings attached as far as for the schools. The schools don't have to do anything to, get the money. So in that case, if you have like a small kind of co-op that meets, like, you might be eligible for this money. It's a pretty broad spectrum. Even in some states, homeschoolers will be eligible for SGO dollars. It depends on what your state considers a school. So if they consider homeschool to be a school in your state, like, you'd be eligible for this money to, and for some people who want to homeschool and that just hasn't been possible, now it is.
I'm very involved in some local educational endeavors in my home state of Pennsylvania. So we'll have to talk offline at some point about that.
Absolutely.
That's fascinating. Great. Well, Corinne, thank you so much for joining us. This was great.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, anytime. And thank you also to our listeners for joining us for another episode of the Napa Legal Podcast. If you enjoy the content we're putting out, we always appreciate it. If you like the podcast, subscribe to our channel on YouTube, Spotify, wherever you happen to be listening from. If you want to see what we're up to, the resources we offer, if you want to support us financially, you can go to napalegalinstitute.org. And I will say that we have at least one initial resource on SGOs that Corrinne wrote for us, and hopefully we'll have some more coming out on this topic in the coming months as we get more clarification on the program. So stay tuned. We hope you'll join us next week as we continue to highlight and discuss the most important ongoing legal issues that affect religious freedom, and particularly the work of faith-based nonprofit organizations. We'll talk to you next week. Thanks for joining us, and God bless you all.